Okay. Good morning, and I don't know if they say in Chavdal Teves what type of a day it is, if it's Good Yontif or whatever we call it, but celebrating Alter Rebbe's yard site, Chavdal Teves. So I thought appropriate, being that Yud Shvat's coming, 70 years from Tafshin Yud, Tafshin Pei. So there's a very powerful clip that I think is worthwhile all of you listening to, but I'll just repeat it. Yud Shvat Tafshin Tezayin. So we're talking about the year 1956. And in it the Rebbe tells a story, and from the rare times the Rebbe actually tells it with a niggin. If you don't know what the clip is, if you like, you send me an email, I'll be happy to share it. You could share it with everybody. Nothing compares to the Rebbe saying it in his own words. So he says the story is brought in Hayem Yem, but the Rebbe says it with more details. That the Alter Rebbe once went over to a younger man. Alter Rebbe, the Bali Lula of Chavdal Teves, went over to a younger man and he said to him, "You have the mitzvah of V'shenantam Levonecha. You have the mitzvah of being mefarnis bnei beisei, to support your family. I have the mitzvah, the Alter Rebbe says, v'shenantam levonecha. So I want to exchange a mitzvah with a mitzvah. I'll pay you to help you fulfill your mitzvah to support your family, and I ask you to teach my son." And he was referring to the Mittler Rebbe. So the younger man agreed. That's what the Rebbe said. And then the Rebbe said a little while later, he came back. This is the Rebbe's words. Younger man, he was a smart man. So he came back to Alter Rebbe realizing, you know what, if you're ready making a deal, he might as well get as much as he can for the deal. Not money-wise. So he says to Alter Rebbe, fine, you'll pay me, and I'll educate your son. But tell me, what should I teach your son? You won't do the teaching, I'll do the teaching, but I need to know what to say. And here the Rebbe paused, and there's no video of it, but maybe there is. I don't think there is one, but in the audio you hear the Rebbe pause for a while. And he said that when I heard the story from the Shver, from the Frierdiker Rebbe, he said it with a niggin, the niggin that the Alter Rebbe used when this younger man asked him what to teach. And the Rebbe paused again and said, "Vos is an Aleph?" This niggin says an Aleph. A Pintele von eben und a Pintele von unten. Das ist ein Aleph. Was ist ein Aleph? A Yud von eben, a Id von unten. Das ist ein Aleph. And then the Rebbe went on to explain. I missed one line, sorry. Yeah. This second time the Rebbe said, "Was ist an Aleph?" He said, "Ayud von neben, Ayid von unten, und a Vov, a Mekasher von Yerushalayim, was ist ein Mechaber zusammen." Das ist an Aleph. Being that the Rebbe said in the name of the Alter Rebbe, and being that today is Chavdal Teves and every word matters, so let's in your own mechanches, educators, and hear the Alter Rebbe in his own words responding to a teacher who would teach his own son, the Mittler Rebbe. Of all things the Alter Rebbe chose was this, because obviously the first thing you teach a child is Aleph Beis, and from Aleph Beis itself, Aleph. It's not just the letter Aleph; it's the tzur, the tzuras ha'es, which is what the Aleph looks like. Every child can visualize that. And when you see it, the tzura, you see a yud on top and a yud below, or a yud, the Eibishter, and a yid lamata, and there's a kav that connects them. And the Rebbe's words then in another sichus is that the foundation of all foundations, Ereishis Chachma Yiras Hashem, is to know your place in this world. And we are a yid lamata, which means an neshama that the Eibishter sent down to this world, and it's lamata, that's the yud below. The Eibishter is above, and you could think that the two worlds do not really connect. The Eibishter is completely beyond us, and we have no relationship. So the Aleph teaches there's a kav, and that kav is called Yerushalayim. that when a Yud Lamata, a Yid Lamata has Yiras Shamayim, that's the key that opens up the window to heaven to connect to the Yud Lamayla. And that's the foundation of all education. Everything else follows from there. So taking that as a cue, as a method, I thought appropriate, we have Chassidus is rich on every possible level. Thousands of pages that the Rabbeim poured their hearts and souls, virtually, literally writing and writing and writing. Even B'derech HaTeva, if you sit down and calculate how long would it take even a Rebbe to write those pages, basically you could say they were writing from morning to night, every day, except Shabbos and Yom. And they felt that this is the best way they can contribute to the Chassidim and to the Klal Yisrael and to the whole world. You could think that maybe they should have spent more time having Yechidus. Everybody has personal issues. Who wouldn't want to have Yechidus with a Rebbe? And yet, though there was Yechidus, but the whole Tanya actually came to address that problem, that the Alter Rebbe didn't have the time to speak to everyone. So he said, I'll gather all the eitzes, the Kutei eitzes, that's why it's called the Kutei Amorim, and put it into a Sefer. And it's as if I'm speaking to you, and even better, as he explains in the introduction. And Alter Rebbe was not saying this just, he says it means it literally. So whether we find the answer or not, that's already our issue. But that the Rabbeim did their part, there's no question that everything is there. In the Rebbe's words about Basel Lagani, literally in the days after Yud Shvat, Tavshin Yud Aleph, the Rebbe said that the Rebbe Al's Bavonit, he addressed everything. That means you have to look in the Maimon, especially the last Maimon, Basel Lagani, you find answers to every question. And the Rabbeim were not exaggerators, God forbid. So that means there's an expression, Imreiku Mikemhu, that the issue is on our end. That means the answers are there. The question is how to find it. And the Alter Rebbe even goes further in Tanya. He says if you can't find an answer, you should go to the Gdelim Shebe'ir. That's pretty right, the Gdelim Shebe'ir. What does Gdelim mean exactly? And that shows you that the Alter Rebbe was much more serious. Didn't just say, read it in this Sefer. If you can't find an answer, someone will help you. I always wondered what Gdelim, I never saw anyone commenting what the word Gdelim is. It's like an interesting word. There's not Mashpim, Rabbonim, Rosh Yeshiva. There's a lot of expressions you could use. And the Alter Rebbe, as we know, is B'diuk Mamish, especially in Tanya. So what is Gdelim? And if you ask yourself, so who the Gdelim, let's say, in our ear? Besides yourself, who else is a Godel? So what is Gedel Yisrael? Do we have a Godel? The Tzemach Tzedek's word that he saw someone by the Seder when it came to Yachatz, and he was measuring which is the bigger part of the matzah. One part has to be like 2/3 and one is 1/3, and you don't always get it right because there's no cutting on the, what do they call it? On the dotted line. So one person was sitting and literally measuring it. So Tzemach Tzedek remarked, a godel was medafa mesnis can godel nicht. A godel you need to measure is not a godel. So what does the Alter Rebbe mean? And it has to be accessible, because if the Alter Rebbe is saying go for answers and you can't find the godel, so we're back to square one. What do we do? It's like saying, there's someone out there that can help you. So this is complete derech hefshe speculation. I was thinking the Alter Rebbe is writing Gedalim, he means it also halachadik. What's a godel in halach? Not a tall man or a woman. A godel is someone who's mature. It's maturity, godless hamechin, godless hamidus. And when a girl becomes bas mitzvah at 12 or a boy at 13 bar mitzvah, that's what we say, they're starting to go into godless. We don't mean chronologically, because you have 50, 60, 70-year-olds that are still as immature as a baby. And so godel means, in simple English, I would translate it as being an emotionally mature person. And a mature, emotional person. You could say, why not godel just intellectually mature? So there's a Sikha Pesach, Tovshin Aleph, I think the second day of Pesach. I discovered it recently, and I was surprised no one ever told us this. And maybe you heard it, maybe you didn't hear it. When that Tanya was printed, the Alter Rebbe, the Chassidim was first printed in manuscript form. Like Kontresim would go out, and people learned it. After the year that it was printed in Tov Kuf Nun Zayin and Ches. So the next year they came to the Alter Rebbe. It's all before Yitas Kislev. And they Chassidim, the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim, said, we don't understand Tanya. So the Alter Rebbe said, Valahal Bazach Kem Nish Verstehen. That's the Alter Rebbe's answer. So what's the second half? Half the thing you can't understand. You'd be surprised what the Alter Rebbe said. The second half, he says, Nigina. Music, song, melodies. That's what the Alter Rebbe said. It's printed. It's not it's Friedrich Rebbe Sicha, second day Pesach, Tovshin Aleph. Actually, I correct myself, Tovshin Dalet. Tovshin Dalet. The Tzemach Tzedek, when he heard that, the Friedrich Rebbe continues, he was born with a Chusha Nigina and a Chusha Tzir, which means he had a natural talent in music and in art. But he always saw it as a contradiction to godliness, so he worked on himself to knock it out of himself. That's what it says there. When he heard the Alter Rebbe said that half of the story of Tanya and understanding Tanya and Chassidus is Nigina, he had charota what he did. And that's where it stops. Now, you can imagine Alter Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek probably didn't knock it all out. And it's all the Fiyerech. I'm just telling you the Shleimus HaSipur, I'm not really going to analyze it. But what do you see from that? So what does Alter Rebbe mean? To sing a nigun when you're reading Tanya? To sing it in the melody? That can't hurt. But I don't think that's what he means. He means nigina is the emotional dimension, a hergish. That's a nigun. It's a hergish halev. Kulmus halev. Kulmus hanefesh, different expressions. It's the quill of the heart, of the soul. That you can read something in a dry and detached way. Tanya is very academic. And you can read it and it's deep. And you have commentary upon commentary. And you can go away, even understanding the academic, the intellectual part of it, the Haskalah, which has plenty of, but miss the whole point. Because the whole Likutei Amarim was not written to describe Chabad doctrine. That's the Maimorim, Shayachid V'Amunah, and the Maimorim of the Alter Rebbe. The Likutei Amarim was written as Eitzes. In a Chanami, the Alter Rebbe, when he writes an Eitzes, it's not exactly a self-help book, Lahav. So it's not easy reading. But the bottom line is, it's advice. It's for personal advice. And if you're lacking the nigun part, which means the emotional connection, you can end up being abstract. And frankly, without criticizing anyone, I grew up in the yeshiva system, as all of you did. And that is, frankly, how we learned it. We never knew about a nigun. We definitely didn't know what the Alter Rebbe said, and no one definitely taught it to us that way. Anybody that did discover the hergish was usually either by osmosis, you pick it up from family, mechanchim, chassidish Yidden, or you don't pick it up, or you figure out later that something's lacking. I'm saying it very bluntly because if we're talking Chavdal Teves, and Alter Rebbe wrote Tanya for a reason, it's important to know all the tools and all the instruments that Tanya provides us. So if you're teaching Tanya in any way, which of course doesn't just mean Tanya, means all of Chassidus and frankly all of Torah. We know this Taimei Torah. Torah is not just words. The nigun of Torah. We read the Trop on Shabbos or during Kriyas HaTorah, there's a nigun. We don't necessarily understand the nigun, but there's a nigun involved. The Ragat Shava writes something very interesting. He says if there was no Chet Egel, which means the Luchas Hashenas, the first tablets would never have been shattered, so it would have been a higher level of learning Torah. And he says these words. He says everybody, not just Shevet Levi, all Bnei Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, would be Menagnim and Meshayrim. Because everyone would know the secret of how to sing Torah, not just read it. Because of the Chet HaEgel, that was lost to us. And it's only the Levim that were blessed with the ability to sing Torah. That you feel the song, not just the words. And we all know, when you hear a nigun, how it touches you. You don't even need Aveda for it. When you hear words can either touch you or they don't touch you. Obviously, because it's like a nigun. You say it and so on. They say the difference between a speech and a party and a fabrengen. So a speech, they say one person speaks and nobody listens. In a party, everybody's speaking and nobody's listening. And by fabrengen, nobody's speaking but everybody's listening. Now what does that mean? That no one's speaking? No, you can have a person speaking, but he's not enamored by himself or herself. And his words are dedicated to the message. That there's a bittul involved, so the words come from the heart. They're not coming from his intelligence and brilliance or arrogance. So, taking all this into account, what you come away from, going back to the Aleph, maybe that's why the Rebbe sang the Nigun. The Frierdiker Rebbe sang the Nigun. Didn't just say, could have said Aleph, a pintle for Neben, a pintle for Nunten. He says it with the Nigun. That's why I suggest listening to it. Because the Rebbe sings a lot better than I did, I can tell you that. And it's not just about the song, it's also the kavan in it. You got to hear it. The Rebbe cries in one of the tenuas there. I think it's kedai to listen to it quite often, actually, because it can infuse us all with a sorely needed recharge of what the kavan is. So in that spirit, I wanted to take this step further. And that is, as mechanches, just as everybody in their particular fields, since Chassidus has the answers to all the questions. That's what the Rabbeim told us, starting from the Alter Rebbe and Tanya. And we often don't know how to find those answers, or in a limited way. You know, most people say, open up a Maimer, yeah, it's very interesting, Geschmack and all that, if that at all, but a lesson in life, too complicated. I'm going to listen a lesson in life from Atzilus, and from Eses Sfiris, and from especially Eidin Sof Lifnei Atzimtzum, and levels that are completely, I can barely control my Nefesh Abamis. Tell me about this, Hech Elemis. So I thought that most appropriate, and since I have worked in this field somewhat, in my own way, I don't have to educate particularly necessarily in a school format, but everybody's a student in this world, and we're all students. So education is a lifetime vocation. It's not just during the school years. That perhaps to sum up some key principles on chinuch that come from Chassidus. And maybe answers also a very important question that I'm sure you think about and I'm sure you act on all the time. What talk is the difference? If you ask the Rebbe, what's the difference between a chinuch that a girl will receive in Beis Rivkah than they may receive in another beautiful Yerushalayim Dika school, al chinuch al taras HaKedesh? What would be the difference? And it's not about pulling rank and superiority. It's about what does Chassidus add to an education. I'm not talking about just the text, what text to learn. That we also learn Chassidus. You don't just learn Shulchan Aruch and history and Tanakh and so on and so forth. What does Chassidus add? And actually, once we know it, frankly, it can be applied to every school. To every school that wants to do a real Torah education. Because the Baal Shem Tov didn't come just to teach Chassidim. He came to transform the whole Jewish world, and including even the non-Jewish world, by extension. So how do we quantify it in ways that can be explained? Not just in general that we have a Chassidish and a Neshama, and so on. Real specifics that if you had to deliver a paper or you had to deliver a discussion and tell me the contribution of Chassidus in the education system, what would it be? Yerushalayim? Every school should have that. Avos Hashem, Yiras Hashem. So what would it be? So here's a few points that I will address. I'll leave time afterwards for questions, if you like, or comments, or rebuttals. It's always geschmack. But so let me put it in these terms. And very specific, not abstract. So obviously, taking off from where I left, what I said earlier, that the Aleph for Neben, the Yud for Neben, the Id for Nunten, and the Yirkah for Yerushalayim. And that you infuse children with that. But that needs elaboration, because I said that which school would not agree with that? Yerushalayim, it's the yesod of every chinuch. I said, Yereshus Chach Miras Hashem. It's a pasuk. So, a few key things. Let's start with the first. And some may be obvious, and some may be less obvious. This is also taken from a lot of sichos of the Rebbe, when he spoke about what chinuch is in education. When I wrote Toward a Meaningful Life, I wanted to do justice as much as possible to the Rebbe's approach. So I literally went through every sicha, letter, maimer, anything that exists. Didn't read everything be'iyum, but just to make sure I cover all the bases. And I actually gathered from the Rebbe the principles. Like, if you look through everything, you come down, what are the key points? So one of the most important, this is not necessarily in order of priority, I'm just going in order. I think they're all vital. And altogether, I believe will create a picture that creates the focus. And as I said, the greatest truths of all are ones that resonate. So you're not going to go away and necessarily say, wow, you may know all this, but maybe it wasn't put quite in words and in a methodology. And that's the first word I want to use, methodology. That the chinuch, al pi Chassidus, and I'll quote from the Alter Rebbe, obviously, since Chavdal Teves, and from other sources, it's methodology versus information. It's character development versus data. It's all the same category. It's empowerment versus facts. And it's a key difference. In the Rebbe's words in a number of sichos, he speaks about the posuk, the Rashi in Parsha Ba'al Escha. Right in the beginning, the question is, why does it say Ba'al Escha Saneris? Should it say B'hat L'Keischa? You don't raise flames, you kindle flames. And the Rashi answers, because there's a particular nuance that's relevant and necessary. That when the Kohen Gadol lit the menorah, it had to be in an Ephraim Shal Heves, Adshesh Tehei Shal Heves Elam Eleh.
What do you want from me, Garfield?
So you just got a lesson of how not to educate, okay? So, which means, simply put, when you light a flame, it can take a second till it catches. And you could say, you know what, I move on. And if it burns out, so what? I'll light it again. What's the big thing? No. The Kohen Gadol had to wait an extra second or two, whatever, till it caught. So the Rebbe asked the question, why is it so negate? What's the worst thing? He's going to light them all. Why the whole Teves has to change a word just to make this emphasis? And the Rebbe answers with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Vehimidu Talmidim Harbe. So also, what's the word Vehimidu? What do you mean Himidu? V'yolamdu Talmidim Harbe. You teach students. You don't make them stand, you make them stand upright. So the Rebbe said to stand on their own feet. That true education is not about imparting information and facts and knowledge. Obviously it includes that. But the goal of it is empowerment. And the Even HaBeichen is very straightforward. You can have someone, as they say the expression, that knows everything, that knows the price of everything, but the value of nothing. I'm not going to say B'Shem Memri, for obvious reasons. But the bottom line is, the point is that it's a very different thing, and it's an Even HaBeichen. To put it in very personal, direct terms for us, it's 25 years from Gimel Tammuz. If the Rebbe did B'hat L'Keischa and not Ba'al Escha, I don't know where we would be today and where the Chabad would be thriving and flourishing and growing. It could only grow because the Kohen Gadol, meaning the Shabbaterenu, did something extra. He didn't just give us information. He empowered people. Everyone on their level. We're not getting to who's at what level. But the bottom line is it's empowerment and it's methodology. You teach people how to answer questions, not just the answers to questions. It's a very, very different thing. One, you always remain dependent on your teacher, and if he's not there, you don't know what to do. And the other one is an expectation that you find answers. I can't tell you how many tzetlach notes I've seen personally from the Rebbe, where he was asked questions, and he says, I sent you there so you figure out the answer, not ask me the answer. I could even tell you on a personal note, the last Fabringen Ba'al Escha Le'esato, Tov Shinun Aleph, was a sikha all about Shal Heves Elam Eleh. The only time I ever saw this answer was directly to us. And we asked a bunch of questions. It was a complicated sikha, so we asked questions. And the Rebbe wrote on the side of the page. He always answered. Never once that the Rebbe did not answer questions we asked. And here the Rebbe answered the whole theme of the Fabringen Shal Heves Elam Eleh, and you're asking me to answer your questions. So I always, obviously we're not very happy with that type of answer, not that we unhappy with the Rebbe, but we wanted the Rebbe's answer. I wasn't interested in figuring out my own answer. That's why you have a Rebbe. And I always thought about it, and it was impossible to imagine the Rebbe didn't answer the question. So then I became convinced that itself was the answer. That he's giving the kayach through saying that. The Rebbe once wrote to a chassid. The Rebbe asked the Rebbe for some advice. The Rebbe said, Katzas Yedidim Mevinim. One of the most famous answers from the Rebbe. The advice of Yedidim, friends that are experts. I can tell you it's one of the most underused hiros from the Rebbe. Tell me how many people you know go to Atzas. Either they go to Yedidim or they go to Mevinim, but not necessarily Yedidim Mevinim. So the Rebbe answers. So he wrote back to the Rebbe. He's not interested in Yedidim Mevinim. He wants the Rebbe's advice. So the Rebbe responded, I don't know about Peh or B'Ksav, he said, Was ardir as ich will empfern durch Yedidim Mevinim. Understand the words here. The Rebbe's not abnegating his responsibility, Chaz v'Sholem. When people say the Sikha Chav Ches Nissen, the Rebbe said, Ich getan alt, with all the sharp language, and Tut Vasirkan. So everyone said, what do you mean? The Rebbe did, I'm going to do more than the Rebbe could do. What do you think? The Rebbe was transferring it? I did what I can do to give you the power now to do what you have to do. That's also from the Rebbe. I could elaborate, we could have a whole talk just on this alone, but I want to go to the other points. So it's not just a small matter, this is a difference between, I don't say life and death, but it's a difference between complete day and night. Educating people with information, and they follow mechanically and robotically everything that was told to them. It's one way to go. Mitzvah Sanosha Mulamada B'Lashon HaKosav, the Pasuk's Lashon, or that you are able to dig and come up with what it says, Chanech Lanar Al Pi Darkei. Why does it say Al Pi Darkei, the Rebbe asks? It should be Al Pi Derech HaTeirah Mitzvah. Since when is there a Darkei? We're always telling everybody, you don't have your own derech. The derech is Teirah Mitzvahs. So I remember it was a Mem Meches, Toshim Mem Ches, I think Emer, or one of those Pashas. The Rebbe was explaining the second Mishnah, second Pedic in Pirkei Avos. So it says, Rebbe Emer, Ezu HaDerech Sheyovel Min HaAdam. And then it continues to Teferes Lei Seha. And I remember the Rebbe, very passionately asked the question, what kind of shaila is that? Since when do we give a person to decide? Sheyovel Min HaAdam, that you decide, you're going to choose and clarify what's the derech? It should say, Ezu Derech Sheyovel Min HaAdam, HaDerech Shel Teir Ner Mitzvah V'Teir Eir. V'derech Chaim Techachas Musar. What's up with mitamol? You're asking a person. And what's the answer? What's nice for you and nice in the eyes of others. We always tell people we don't care what others think. It's up to our sense of aesthetics. And the Rebbe's answer, again, both poshet, but brilliant. The Rebbe says, remember, this is Pedic Sheni. We already learned in Pedic Rishon, Moshe Kibul Teirah Sinai Masar Yeshua. And the Mishnah relies that we internalize that. That the Eibishter gave the Torah to Sinai to Moshe, and Moshe passed it on to Yeshua, L'Skenim, and so on. So we know Nasa Kedelim Nishma. We know that Kabbalah is the yesod of everything. But now comes Pedic Sheni, step 2 is Nishma. That should be, you should own it. You should personalize it. It's not enough that just came to you from above. Matan Torah even is called Medor Rabbi L'Araisa, the Gemara says. The Matan Torah, because even though they didn't say Nasa Kedel Nishma and all that, but what does it say? It says Purim came, and there was Kima v'Kibla Yehudim. The Gemara says why? Because at the end of the day, Matan Torah was Kof Aleim Har Kigigis. They used to held the mountain above them, so there was some coercion. And they Medor Rabbi L'Araisa means that they could always come and say, you know what? We didn't fully accept this at our own volition. That's what so that's why Purim comes. Kimu v'kiblu, that this time it was not through a gilim or maila. Purim did not happen through any nisim gluyim. It happened at their initiative. So this is a yesod in all of Yiddishkeit. When you understand it from the point of view of Chassidus, everything gets illuminated. You start realizing what's the difference between getting the koyach to do something and then your initiative. And what is the Rebbe's words? Yud Shvat Tov Shin Yud Aleph Retzach and Shtein Fegelach and Buzim. Don't convince yourself, deceive yourself into thinking I'm going to do the job for you. I'll help you, but Aveda B'Keach Atzmei. And where do we have it more than now after Gimel Tammuz? So, number 1 is the empowerment, methodology. And frankly, I never saw it explicitly, but it's pretty implicit, that if you had to choose between facts and empowerment for sure is key. Because that will bring you to the facts, and facts not necessarily will bring you to empowerment and methodology. And also, there's an Even Abecha. You give a test to someone, the test will test their knowledge. Try a test to see how empowered they became. That they have to use some creative thinking, and they have to come up with their own... People often come to me and they say, well, they want an advanced class in Chassidus. So I say, what do you mean by advanced? I know what they mean. I am base. I want to learn the deepest stuff. I said, that's not advanced. That's just deeper. You want advanced? Every student in the class is going to be required every month to deliver a paper and get up in front of everyone and present. That's advanced. That not the teacher is going to teach you. You're going to get up and present. And no one ever takes me up on the offer after that. How do you like that? They're not looking for that advanced. They want advanced that stimulates your brain buds, whatever you call them, the neurons. So that's number 1. You look in Tanya, especially Pedic Tezvov, just to give a taste from the Alter Rebbe. Pedic Tezvov is based exactly on that you can learn 100 times, and if it's a teva, regilis, which means it's the custom, it's not called aveda, lo yavode, because that's the custom. They studied, they repeated the Gemara 100 times. Pirkei me'epamim va'achas. Alter Rebbe says that one achas after 100, obviously, it changes everything because you went out of your comfort zone. So it's only 1. but it's your one, and your one is stronger than the 100 you do by custom. And there's many more places. As I said, I want to keep it more or less limited here. Time's it? Okay, good. So that's number one, empowerment. And now, just for one comment, does that mean that other schools that not Be'esivka, not Chassidus schools can't? Of course they could. Chassidus is not just for Chassidim. It was not a maflega, the Alter Rebbe said. The Alter Rebbe said Chabad is not a maflega. It's not another group. It's not another party. So like when someone says, I asked somebody, I said, so what do you think? In the newspapers, magazines, they write, there's Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, and Chabad. So what do you think? They say, wow, unbelievable, we finally reached our own department. And I say, I think the Alter Rebbe, the Rebbe would say it's a tragedy. What do you mean, another group? The whole point of Chabad was to infuse everybody. It's not a maflega, it's not a department, it's not a corporate entity. So therefore, anything I say here is obviously Chassidus meant to be exported into every circle. And can this be used also even in lahavdil secular education? Absolutely. I know a child psychologist, not even Jewish. He read my book, Torah, Meaningful Life, and then he wrote a column. He's a syndicated columnist on child psychology, and he quoted this point. And I asked him, because I reached out to him, I said, you never saw it anywhere else? You never saw anywhere the idea of empowerment versus facts? He says, no, I never saw it quite clearly spelled out. I was surprised a bit, because I'm sure someone came. Now we know we take credit for anything anyway, so it doesn't matter where they got it from. But the point is that Chassidus makes it very, very clear, and I think, of a number of sources. Let's go to number 2. The big picture informs a small picture. When you learn Torah, any chelik in Torah, Pshat, Remesh, Drus, Sod, Nigla, Pnimius, so you touch a piece, and you can learn a Rashi, it's all Torah. And we know the expression, Etzem Shatefes Miktsase, at the Teves Bekule, one vort in Torah is the whole Torah. But you don't necessarily see it begoli. You read a pasuk, not necessarily. There are psukim that are very fundamental, but there are many that don't seem to carry. Like a Yud Gimel Ikrim is Yud Gimel Ikrim. It doesn't say Shabbos carries the whole Torah on it, and not to minimize it. It's just that some mitzvahs are clothes and some are not. The same thing in Hashkafa. You can have different approaches. We know the 12 tribes. When Kriyas Yamsuf came, the Yud Beis Shvatim, each one b'Mesilosa Yala. 12 paths. Why? Because Nara Pashta is an expression, different customs, and that's how the Eibishter wanted it. Svardim and Ashkenazim, and there's the different Shvatim, and there's different Chugim and so on. After Churban Beis HaMikdash, even before there was Shvatim, and afterwards for sure, the Asir Derav and Asir de Shmuel, every community, it was decentralized essentially. Everyone in the context and under the rubric and umbrella of Halacha and Torah. But there's Shammai and Hillel, and they disagree adamantly about many things. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. So, in Hashkafa too, you can learn something, and you get a bit of the picture. Chassidus does this. When you learn the Alter Rebbe, starting from Tanya, and especially in the Maimorim, as they're developed in the later generations, there's a big picture. Simple example. You could have, and I've tested this, every child I would say every child in a Chabad home or Chabad school, you ask them, why are we here? Almost everybody knows to make a dira b'tachtein. Now, if they know anything more is another question. But that yesod of purpose of existence, which is the yesod of everything, is very common language by us all. I'm not getting how deep we know it or not, but I can assure you, because I told you to test it, ask an average person who did not grow up in school, why are we here? The answer will usually be to do mitzvahs, so we prepare for Nene Meziv Ashchina in Gan Eden. Basically, of a long retirement in a kale in heaven. And there's even Maimor Chazal that you may suggest that. What's the difference? Is it wrong? No, there's an element to that. Schar HaNeshamas, Schar in Gan Eden, even Schar L'Osad Lovi. It's not like completely off, but it's the small picture. And the Alter Rebbe says, Dir b'tachtein and Perek Lamed Vav and Tanya, it wasn't just Rahman al-Islam. I've heard this from people, even Rabbanim, who say, Alter Rebbe took some obscure Medrash Tanchuma and turned it into the Yesod of all Yiddishkeit. As obscure Medrash Tanchuma, exactly, who speaks such a language? What do you mean? You decided it's obscure? Why? Because you didn't know it before. What makes it obscure? And what's not obscure? The vart is this: the Chassidus is the big picture that informs the small picture. And someone says, "What's a mitzvah?" Most people will say it's a commandment. And the Alter Rebbe will say it's from the Lashon Tzafse v'chibur, connection. Big difference between connection and commandment. Commandment's correct, it's not wrong, but it's a small limited definition of a mitzvah. Connection is a whole different story. The Eibishter gave us in the language of Tanya Chachmose v'Ritzenish al Kadosh Baruch Hu, manifested the Chachma in Torah and the Ratzon in mitzvahs. And when you do a mitzvah, you're connecting. Because commandment, you could also have a commandment from a master to a servant. Or a connection is a relationship, is a partnership even. So it changes the whole way of looking at every aspect of Torah. And I can go through a lot of examples, but you try it out. Everything in Chassidus is always the big picture informing the small picture. And that's a major difference. And I speak again personally. I didn't hear this when I was in yeshiva, in the Lubavitch yeshivas. Now, I didn't hear it, but I guess my friends didn't hear it either. Not that we didn't pick up, sometimes you pick up, as I said, by osmosis, Chassidishkeit, the Rebbe, but to articulate it? If someone had said that to us 15-year-olds, trust me, it would have made a big difference, because you think differently. Someone says, that example they give, they put the 10 blind men into a cage with an elephant, and they expect the blind to describe what's in this cage with you. So they can't see, so they start feeling. This one says an elephant is like a water hose, because he felt the trunk. This one, the elephant's like a leaf of a tree, because the ears of an elephant are very like leaf-like. This one is like the stump of a tree trunk, the legs. And they went through it. Did anyone say anything wrong? No, but they only said a piece of it. And then someone who could see says, you know what this is? It's called an elephant. As soon as you hear elephant, it's a whole different story. It's a composite of many details. So when people ask the question, so is Chassidus coming to replace other chelkei Chaz v'shalom? It's giving the big picture. So when you learn Chassidus, and then you go to any sefer, whether it's other Chassidus, not Chabad, or it's Nigla or others, it informs you to a whole different way. Oh, I see that now I understand. I mentioned before an Aleph. The Alter Rebbe's Vort gives you the picture of an Aleph. This way, an Aleph, the Aleph of Yiddishkeit, that there's an Eibishter. But that there's a Yud Lamata, and a Yud Lamaila, and a Yud Lamata, and so on. So that's number 2, big picture. And it's something you can articulate even to, young children, how young, everybody according to their language. But the idea, as a teacher, that you know it, and you know you're doing that, changes a lot. Because some students will pick it up quickly, so others may not pick it up right away. But the idea is there. The idea that there's a big picture. Mashiach is big picture thinking. It's not small picture thinking. When many even say, Mashiach will come when he'll come. What are you doing right now? I have to do mitzvahs. But Chassidus, starting from the Baal Shem Tov and even earlier, the Kabbalah, the Arizal, they introduced Mashiach. Not introduced as Chaz v'Shalom for the first time. It's everywhere. The Rambam Paskins, the Psukim, and the Chazal, and Yeshaya, and other Nevi'im, Amaleim, they're filled with this. But to make it a principle, that we're not just doing mitzvahs. I don't say the word just. It's not only doing mitzvahs. It's on a journey. We're on a journey to a destination. Imagine you're driving on a train, or you're going on a journey, and you don't know there's a destination. Or you're told, don't think about the destination. You think about this moment here. And then think about someone who sees, we're going somewhere. We're headed somewhere. You tell me who's going to be more passionate. There's a direction, there's guidance. There's a beginning of the journey, the beginning of Ma'aseh Bereishis, and there's an end to the journey, when the world will fulfill the purpose for which God created it. This is big picture thinking. And then it informs every detail. And therefore informs it with a whole different dimension, because it's not just another detail. You feel, I'm not just putting a brick into a building. Your brick accumulates with millions of others and billions of others building blocks that are building a structure called the Geula. That you're putting the Aleph into Geula, and you're creating a Geula that will redeem not just us, but all generations, and the Eibishter even Shchinta Begalusa. And just a few examples. That's Chassidus. The next thing. And this may be a little more personal, maybe psychological even. I know that word some people don't like. I just want to say a little line about that. I use the word. I remember when I started my life Chassidus Applied, I used the word psychology, and I got hate mail. More or less. Anonymous, of course. So I couldn't respond individually, so I had to respond publicly. And so I understood the resistance, trust me, because what are you using the word psychology? It's associated with Freud and with other secular thinking. It sounds like secular, and not Alter Rebbe going to diminish the whole Tanya Kadisha to psychology. So I decided to do a little research. And I looked it up. What do you think psychology means? Logi is a study, and psych is the soul, the study of the soul. So I said, my next program, I said, okay, I want to tell you all, you're right. I'm not going to use psychology anymore. I'm going to use the study of the soul. And of course, I was leading up to something. You don't even know what the word means. So we're ready to surrender the study of the soul to the Goyish world because you don't like the word. That would be like we're not going to use Mashiach because the Christians distorted it. They don't own it. If anyone owns it, we own it. I think the world owns it. The Eibishter gave it to us. You have to know how to translate it. So I'm not going to say that Tanya is a book on psychology per se, but it's definitely a study of the soul. So just semantics. So we don't even know what the word means. I'm only pointing it out that sometimes, it's not just coming from some type of open-minded, someone who's read books and bringing, Nechaname would not bring Buddhism into the picture. But psychology is, and again, it doesn't mean it has to be used. I'm not saying it's a mitzvah to use that word. Just point out that sometimes using such words actually can force you to think a little more. And that, study of the soul, that's interesting. Instead of dismissing Tanya Kadisha that belongs in heaven for Ava V'yira for people who are not tzaddikim, but they're Beinanim, and saying, you can never become a Beinani, you make it no. It's a study of you and me and our souls and our lives and our psyches, etc., etc. So the third thing I want to say about from Chassidus is the issue of the difference between preventive medicine and remedial medicine. Getting to the root of a problem versus dealing with the symptoms. And this you have many sikhs of the Rebbe and Chassidus as well, obviously. When you think about it, there's a powerful maimon called Imruach. I think Imruach HaMeshel from the Frierdiker Rebbe. I think Tzadik Aleph, Tafresh Tzadik Aleph. It's printed in Maimonim Kontres. The Rebbe quotes it very often, especially in Bosel Legani Tov Shin Lamed Aleph, if you want some Aramikamus. And there he says, interesting thing. We'll start from the Chassidus of it. He says that when a person does an Aveda, Rachmana Litzlan, so we're talking about Bosel Legani, Nichnas by Ruach Shtus the Lulmazeh. So what's happening? So he says clearly, now the Frierdiker Rebbe says in the Mayim Bosel Legani, in the first prokim, that's Avenesechem Mavdilim Beinechem and Bein Avinu Shebeshamayim. It creates a schism, a split, a breach. That this way we're connected. I mentioned before, mitzvahs are connection. And here, God forbid, when a mitzvah is not done, or the opposite, it's like a severing one of your lifelines. Frierdiker Rebbe, interesting, in another mimer, brings actually a moshel from deep diving. There's two types of diving. You can dive in with scuba diving, and there's deep sea diving, where the divers would go down with a pipe connected to the top. So they didn't have oxygen tanks on their back. They would go down, they could walk on the ground, and they were connected. Frierdiker Rebbe brings this moshel. He says, what happens, Rachmana Litzlan, if that tube, that line is somewhat compromised? It can be life and death. So that's the moshel he gives for mitzvahs and aveda. So mitzvah from the word connection, and aveda from the word havorim reshus l'reshus, another chassidish taich, which means not just a sin, a disconnection, alignment, misalignment. This way you're aligned to your purpose, and this way you're not aligned. And when Adebishter told Adam, Ayeko, he asked him Ayeko, he was saying, as the Alter Rebbe gave the minister the answer. What did he say? Not Ayeko, he was asking where he was physically. Of course the Adebishter knew where Adam was. I don't recognize the Tzelem Elokim. You've lived so many years in your life. What have you done with yourself? Where are you standing? Sometimes you sit near somebody at a table and they space out. I say, where are you? Of course you know they're sitting there. You want to know where their presence is. Where's their mind, their heart? Are you with me? That's severing. That's a disconnection. So in the Maimer Tzadik Aleph, the Rebbe cites this in explaining where does it come from? Where does it come from that it's possible if you're connected to a lifeline? How's it even possible that you would a diver, God forbid, have a meaning that he's going to sever his line from his oxygen? It's life and death. So how does it happen? So nichnas bei ruach shtus, that's why it says ein adam aveda v'aveda elim came nichnas bei ruach shtus, because no person would ever disconnect. There's no be aveda, which means havara, to move away from your lifeline, unless you're blinded. So the Rebbe continues and asks, so why are we blinded? So that's where Chassidus explains that every Aveda is rooted in the Chet Tzadas, the first sin. That was when Adam and Chava made the first Havara. They moved away from their purpose. And where's the Chet Tzadas rooted? In Miyot HaLavana, in the diminishment of the moon on the fourth day of creation. And where is the Metal of honor rooted? In Shviras HaKelim, where Chassidus talks about the shattering of the imbalance in Elam Ateu between Eris and Kelim. I'm going to go through the whole explanation, but it's a misalignment in Kedusha, but it's still a misalignment. Too much Eir for too little Keli. It shatters. And where is the Shviras HaKelim rooted? In the Tzimtzum Arishan, when the Eibishter first concealed himself, conceptually, not in time. Concealed his presence. As soon as there's a concealment, it's just a matter of evolution, if you wish, ishtalshalos, that ultimately it can lead to Chetei Tzadas, which then can lead to who knows what. It all starts with one concealment. And you'll probably know the Sikh of the Rebbe, the famous Sikh Tu B'Shvat Lametes, Tosh Lametes, the Rebbe crying, Mamish Chias, Atzumas. So recordings of it. And he speaks about the Moshel and Chassidus, about the father concealing himself from the son or from the child. And then he says, he hid him, he concealed himself so well. Why are we responsible that God concealed himself for? And the Rebbe then said, the famous atheist, Mezunti gesucht, Monti gesucht. The Rebbe couldn't even finish, which means we're looking and seeking. But what do you want from us? Essentially capturing the essence of what the Tzimtzum Arishan did. Now, what is all this relevant to to our discussion here? You see Chassidus always dissecting. There's never satisfied with the symptoms. You don't begin with a sin. You begin what caused the sin. And you begin what caused the thing that caused the sin. With a disconnection, I should say. How many levels did I mention here? An Aveda, Chetei Tzadas, Mita Lavona, Shviras HaKelim, Tzimtzum Arishan. If you want to go, it goes even deeper, Lifnei Tzimtzum. But I think it's enough levels. What does that mean in simple English? It means you see a problem anywhere, whether it's with ourselves, with a student, there's always more going on. I'm not talking about superficial things, someone has a tantrum or they're in a bad mood. We're talking about something that is signifying Chassidus fundamentally. And this is something you can really, I find this as not an argument, but a presentation. People are blown away by it because they don't think like that. Most people think Torah mitzvahs is behavioral. It's about how you behave or don't behave. That it's actually identifying the root of an issue, that we go to the root of it. Now, Kamuvan, we know that you don't always have to go to the root to solve a problem. You can put a Band-Aid on. But often, deeper things, you have to go to the root. So Chassidus doesn't mince words, and it goes and explains level by level how anything you see is never what you see is not what you get. There's always deeper factors. Just thinking like that changes things, because you see something, many people will dismiss it. And we know this as parents, as educators. You know, even if you're not that trained, you could sense, you see something, some consistent patterns, you see a disruptive behavior, you see a change in a personality, there's smoke, there's fire. And I'm not talking about being paranoid and panicking and stuff like that. I'm just saying it's a way of looking at things that you're not just looking and saying, okay, how do I get rid of this problem quickly because I have other things to do. It's really being able to listen. What did the Rebbe make the Alter Rebbe made such a tumult when the Mittler Rebbe didn't hear the cry of the child because he was learning Teda, the Kel Yelad Becher. Not to hear the cry of a child and you're learning Teda? So you could answer what do you mean? He's learning Teda, it'll take away all cries of children. Because a child is crying, that means there's something there. So that's number 3. Number 4 is, the whole Tanya is based on this one, called Relevance. Teaching the relevance. You can learn the whole Chumash. I'm not even talking about Chumash. You can talk about the Teves Shabbat Peh for sure, and not even know why it's relevant. Here we have a whole pasha now, Shmeis, Ve'era. So yeah, there's a pasuk here, a pasuk there. I'm sure we can all come up with a relevant message. But there are pasukim, we're going to come to Sefer Vayikra, Pasha Mitzera, Tzazriya. Tell me what the relevance is. So many people answer, it doesn't matter what's relevance. Teres Hashem, there's El B'Teira. Or you hear all about the children of and grandchildren of Ishmael, or of Esav. And you go on. I never counted, but I could tell you probably 80% of Chumash, unless you know Chassidus, you're probably not going to be able to find a relevant message. And what is that? What's the message of that, if you learn that way? That Torah is very holy, at best, but is it relevant to my life? That every word, every letter is a Heirah. Now this is, I know, given to you, so I don't have to, I'm preaching to the converted here. But it's important sometimes to spell out. This didn't come from nowhere. What is the most repeated expression from the Rebbe in the Sichos? I've said it a number of times. So most people say, Amaisu Iker. It's pretty close, but there's something much more. Right. Teira Meloshen Hera. There are Farbrengens where the Rebbe probably said it over 15 times. And I remember thinking about it. I said, 1 second. The Rebbe said it once. How many times do you have to repeat that? We know. Why do you have to repeat it? Because as many times as we hear it, it's not enough. Because Teira can be very abstract and very detached. So how many mitzvahs are teluyas b'zman shebeis hamidrash hayekayim? So comes Chassidus and says, no, every mitzvah is kayim today. The question is, b'gashmis or b'ruchnis? There's no such thing that doesn't exist. Everything. And when there's one iota that doesn't seem to exist, we're always looking, it has to be somewhere. In some way, some Hera and Avedas Hashem. I would not be exaggerating if I said this is a transformative way of looking at Torah. Again, many of us, we take it for granted, as I do. But when I think about it, step back, people learn Torah. People, you go to a shul, Kriyas HaTorah on Shabbos, and most devout shuls, and they will correct the Balkeda on any letter and so on. You know how the people are obsessed with that? And then you ask them, so tell me, and I did it once, I said, they thought I was being cynical. I was, but I had a point. I said, tell me, I saw you corrected all those words. You seemed very proficient in the Asius and the letters and the trop. Gavaldi. Tell me, is it negate to our lives to know? The guy looked at me like I was crazy. Who says it has to be negate to life, he told me. I said, the way you were dealing with it looked like a negate b'nefesh. The guy didn't correct it. You just kept on saying, no. You know? My point of the matter is, I'm not taking away correct, gesundheit. But you could read a whole parsha and not even ask the question, what difference does it make? The Rebbe, exact opposite. I don't think there's a sicha. I know there's no sicha. A Rashi, even an obscure Rashi that would seem to be talking about some digduk, and the Rebbe turns it always, there's always Hera there, never no Hera. And it wasn't just the Rebbe was looking for Hera, he was teaching us a method. The method is Torah is relevant, chayenu ve'erech yemenu. And you can't explain that expression in Ma'ariv. That's our life and our sustenance if you don't understand the relevance. So most people say it's relevant, but Ruchni is somewhere, it touches my neshama. Okay, listen, some people, that's enough for them. But I would submit that if you can actually explain it to people and show its relevance, it'll be a lot more likely they'll be passionate about it and not drop it so quickly. When you know how relevant it is to your life. Even the definition of mitzvah naveda that I mentioned before. Okay, that's I've done 4, right? Okay, next one. What's the next one? Root. I want to say one more thing about relevance. When I taught here at Rivkah many years ago, you're all too young to remember. It was a different century. So I was teaching Tanya Kalemersht. I don't know how much I got through Tanya, but I tried my best. Huh?
You didn't do the Aleph.
That's right.
That's about 18 years ago.
There we go. You're very good memory. I'm not going to ask you your age, young lady, okay?
Not even double.
Okay. So since I was working on Sichos at the same time, and I had the opportunity, and I always exploited it as much as I could, as the Rebbe. So I was always, since the Alter Rebbe writes, Korev Elecha, that Sefer Zeh Miyusad, al Posuk, Ki Korev Elecha Adov Mei Befichel B'Vav Chala Seisei, Levai Hetiv, Eich Shur Korev, Mei Derech Tzorah, Derech Harucha, Be'ezes Hashem Yizbarach. That word Korev. How do you translate Korev? So most people say close to you, because the pasuk says right before that, Lo Yerechekihi, Le Mei V'Layam, Le B'Shamayim. So what Rachik is far, distant, and Korev is close. But what does close mean? You sit close to Anor and Kadesh. That's what Korev means. So I decided I'm going to ask the Rebbe. I smuggled it into another question in the Sikha. Then I said, I teach Tanya. I want to know if you can translate Korev as relevant. The Rebbe just made a check. That's all he did. Didn't cross it out, which he would do very easily. He made a check. So it has a certain hechsher mumayla. And it changes everything if you think about it. Because relevant, 1 second here. So then there's not one letter in Tanya that's not relevant. Even when you're learning Prokim, it seemed to be an introduction to another Perek, every letter is relevant. And so Dover Pashav, the Rebbe said Teves is Meloshen Hera, definitely Chassidus is Meloshen Hera. So these are things that are, as I said, how Chassidus informs. I did 4, correct, so far?
Yeah, we have 5 minutes. This is fascinating. 5 minutes.
Okay, fine. Not fascinating enough, right? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I know I also have a...
Your child's cry, you can't ignore it.
I got it. I'm just looking at the time. I can't even see. What time is it, by the way?
5:02.
Oh, okay. So I'll just do one more. I was going to do a few more, but I'll do one more.
You can have
No problem. It's all right. As you know, I'm not getting paid by the words, so it's all right. So, what was the last one I wanted to say? I think I have it even listed here. Let me see. I said relevance. Oh. Well, I really did it, but I'll just spell it out. Empathy and emotional intelligence. So I spelled it out a little with Nagina. But I think, and again, I speak from my own wounded childhood. It's just a joke. I'm just kidding. It sounded good. No therapy. I wasn't that wounded. I had wonderful people in my life. I was not abused, since it's open mic. I'm just full disclosure here. Okay, so, but I'll tell you what was lacking. And I think it's something that I believe, maybe for me, one of the most passionate things I think we need. Emotional intelligence. Now, the truth is, this is a more important talk for men than for women, because they definitely suffer more from it. I'm a man, so I know. And that is, you can be very intellectually brilliant and know everything it says in the books, book smart, and you know how to play chess, I mean also figuratively, and mind games. But when it comes to a little emotional intelligence and sensitivity, it could be very far apart and should never be confused. And many people actually, who are very smart, hide their emotional immaturity through their brains. They have excuses for everything and everything's explained, and they manipulate their way through. I hope none of you are exposed to such men. But there are. And there are women also that way, unfortunately. But the point I want to make is not talk about the negative. Chassidus is not just about brilliant hashkafas. I mentioned before Tanya and Nigina. And it's not just the Alter Rebbe said it. Look how Nigin plays a prominent role in a Fabrengen, by the Rabbeim. We don't just have thousands of pages of Chassidus. We have Nigunim. I mean, who knows how many Nigunim? No community has so many Nigunim. So it means that it was a deliberate effort to sing and to celebrate that way, and different Nigunim, Nigunim Simcha, Nigunim Svadius. I know those names they use that as a default name. You don't know the difference between one Nigun Simcha than the other. Huh? So, Nigun Shabbos V'yantiv, right. And Nigun Dveikus or something like that. And some have names. So translate into simple chinuch language, emotional intelligence. Not just that you're emotionally intelligent as you address your students and children, but also you teach them emotional intelligence. I say this very honestly. I went through the whole yeshiva. I don't remember once someone talking to us about being a mensch. How do you like that? Like being not jealous, dealing with anger, dealing with bullying. It just didn't exist. One drasha I remember, Rav Ushpal Olav Hashalom. I don't know if you remember him. And I remember he gave a talk. It was about cleanliness. Pashut cleanliness. And I remember he said, Am bocher, a ingel, darf allemaal sein rein unter der Nägel. Your nails should be clean. That's what he basically gave a drasha about. Cleanliness. Afterwards, I went over to him. I was maybe 15. It took me, what I was, not because of the brilliance, because he cared. He cared about a human being. And he spoke very practical. Now you'll say, you need Chassidus for cleanliness? No. Cleanliness in the Kia, Nikoyin Tara Mevil Dekdusha is a Yisod and Torah. But he spoke about it personally. And I went over to him. I decided I'm going to ask him. I said to him, why do we have to be clean? Not that I was finding a reason not to take a shower, obviously. So he says to me, these are the words he says, because I eat is mamleches kayanim v'gei kodesh. When I gei kodesh, that was ein rein, like a melech. It left an impact till this day. Maybe because no one ever said it. Now, you could say, 1 second, nobody ever said such a thing? Yeah, how do you like that? I don't remember, mate. And I have pretty good memories. I don't remember. What does it tell me? Not that anyone was against it, that it was either self-understood or they think it. But it would make a difference because, when you grow older, you start saying, 1 second, I'm learning all this Torah, and no one's telling me that, it's all about ideas. And as my teacher mentioned, that you see is not a mensch, you say, okay, great lesson. The Frierdiker Rebbe said when he came to America, and one of the battles was that chinuch should be 2 things he wanted. Hebrew, the Limudei Kodesh should be in the morning, and Shemerei Shabbos should be the teachers. So they said, the Federation or whatever, the Board of Jewish Education said, Rebbe, there's a fire burning of ignorance, assimilation. Who cares what water you throw on it? If it's a fire, dirty water, clean water, what difference does it make what the teacher is like? The Frierdiker Rebbe answered, the famous answer. He said, that's right when it's water. But if it's someone who's teaching something different than he behaves, it's kerosene. It's oil, gas. And it's going to make the fire worse. Better a child shouldn't learn about Shabbos than to learn from someone who they see afterwards as Mechal Shabbos, because then that's also a lesson. Then you learn about it and you don't have to be it. In the broadest sense of the word, I consider this part of emotional intelligence, where you don't allow yourself to become disconnected, a head without a heart, and disconnected from the emotional impact and the relevance that we spoke about before. This is, I think, Dura Gevei, every line of Chassidus is about this. How many Maimorim just on that? Shari Yochid V'Amunah is based on that pasuk. And the Levavecha, not just the Yadaita. And I think that is, as I said, there's a lot more to be said. I try to do a little justice. This is the Alter Rebbe's day. So it's a tall order to rise to that occasion. But I think Tel Nachachem V'Yech, which means this is not by any means exhaustive. It's about really maybe, well, if you can apply yourself, and I'm sure you'll find even other you say this, or more you say this, or even bigger you say this, and hope you share them with me as well. So, bottom line, I want to just say in a concluding note that Hashem Matev Chalkenu, the Rabbi and the Chassidus they gave us, which they have inscribed themselves in it. It's not just books and words, it's them. The closest thing to Rebbe is his words. That's where he is. Even Begashmius, the Rebbe is here, Begashmius, it's his words that are him, more than his physical presence, that we should try to take advantage and live up to all the Mesiras Nefesh and the commitment that the Rabbeim invested, starting from the Alter Rebbe, through the Rebbe, Deir Hashvi, and ultimately, of course, all this leads to Geula Amitis V'Ashlema, which is, of course, the big picture, as I talked about before, that every detail leads, and the Rebbe told us, promised us that this is it, and we just have to do our bit, and clearly something has not yet been done on every possible scale, and you have the great schus to not just be yourselves Yirei Shamayim and Mechanches, but also generations that you're shaping. And it's a life, it's nefesh. You have souls in your hands. It's neshamas. We're not just talking here of children. Neshamas that will be the future, and they, with us, will march to the Gula with the Rebbe together. Thank you so much.
What was empowering? It was the big picture. It was relevant. It was
Root.
Oh, it was rooted. And of course, last but not least, it was something which really has been full of Rishachas. I think we all go home very, very enhanced. Not to think down. I want to thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure. Slach Rabbi.